TW Wrestling Talk here. Last week of June, last episode, coming off of last Raw of June, and we're going to kick off the show with a breaking news update regarding the show. Actually, this edition of TW Wrestling Talk was supposed to be the first multi-person edition, but unfortunately there were some there's a virus on my computer that was tampering with it, and unfortunately went to get the show recording here and have all the sound effects ready and everything set up and be able to even record the show, and the virus was preventing me from doing so. But now it seems like I gotta at least have a way to work around the virus for the meantime. So next week we'll start the show. It's gonna be me and someone I graduated with, known for a long time, Wayne Kircher, longtime wrestling fan. So we'll start that next week, and I think we're gonna call it the Great Wrestling Debate, rather than TW Wrestling Talk, because it's not gonna be a one-person show, for the most part. So next week we'll start that. Now we're coming off of Raw. Yeah, I mean, a lot of expectations, I guess. A lot of big moments the previous week on Raw. This week was all right. I mean, you had a good main event overall. Um, I mean, Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton setting up what would be a good main event later in the show. They set it up nicely in the beginning of the show with, the show opening with Daniel Bryan, and then, of course, later on the show closing with Daniel Bryan, standing tall, chanting yes, the whole 9 yards. So it was a good, if you're a Daniel Bryan fan, this was definitely a good episode of Raw, and if you want to see him get pushed in the future, tonight showed a step in the right direction. And I think it was a good win for him to get over Randy Orton. I mean, the street fight, he wanted throughout the night he wanted a match with Randy Orton. He didn't want anything else stopping the match, and I mean, he ended up making Orton tap out to a modified yes lock with the kendo stick. So he got the job done, and in the process, they took the kendo stick and they hit each other multiple times with it. At one point, Daniel Bryan power bombed Orton through a table on that side of the ring, and at one point, Orton T-bone suplexed Bryan through the end of a table, just catching the end of it. So, yeah, I mean, there was some good moments here. I mean, for a 15-minute main event on Raw, this was pretty decent. A step in the right direction for Daniel Bryan, and for everyone, including myself, who's waiting for this Randy Orton heel turn. After that match, you had to wonder, all right, what's he gonna do? And what does he do? He shakes Daniel Bryan's hand. So no heel turn yet, and I think it's one of these things where WWE just wants us to keep watching, see what goes down between these two, and with Orton in particular, on whether or not he's really going to turn heel. But it could happen at any given time, so we'll just have to wait and see on that. And furthermore, while I'm talking about these two guys, I guess the first Money in the Bank match, the first of what I would think would be two, the competitors were announced, and it's going to be a 6-man, I think, by the looks of it. It's Daniel Bryan, Orton. You got Kane in there. Christian. Uh, you got a mix of some well, I don't know if they didn't really declare whether this was I don't think if this was a SmackDown or a Raw Money in the Bank. I guess they'll define things more as we get closer here, but Rob Van Dam, of course, is going to be in this. It's a Money in the Bank match that seems to be centered around veterans, and former champions, former Money in the Bank winners. You know, it's centered around already established guys, which was similar to the Raw Money in the Bank match last year, um, which John Cena, of course, won. So it seems like, and that was kind of put together in the same fashion. Um, and I think I wonder, whatever happened in the days of when they had qualifying matches for these Money in the Bank briefcase matches, but that seems to be somewhat of a thing of the past, at least when it comes to how they put this one together, where they just kind of decide, all right, these guys are going to be in the Money in the Bank match here, and I guess they're still going to determine another one where they're going to hopefully have a rising young star guy from the mid card that could use that elevation. They could use the Money in the Bank briefcase um, in their position. I'm thinking a guy like Wade Barrett, perhaps. Um, Guys of that level in the WWE, that could, that where one of them could use that. They could use the Money in the Bank briefcase, certainly, for the World Heavyweight Championship or whatever. Um, I guess again we'll wait and see how they iron things out with this. Um, Next to preview a little bit next week on well, what I guess will be called the Great Wrestling Debate. We'll me and Wayne, the other host, we're gonna talk about Money in the Bank. These I guess particularly these two matches, as that's the main focus of the pay per view. And quite frankly, I don't think Mark Henry against John Cena is that interesting of a main event, if you ask me. Um, and you got Chris Jericho, who's probably going to put over Ryback. So I mean, these other matches, you know, just aren't too exciting for the most part. I guess you're going to have Dolph Ziggler taking on Del Rio for the World Heavyweight Championship again, by the looks of it. That could be somewhat interesting, just because we want to see if Ziggler's going to get the belt back, and I want to see Ziggler shine. So you know that's to some degree is interesting, I guess. Um, but the Money in the Bank matches are where most of the interest is going to be, in my eyes, and definitely next week on this channel, me and the new host are gonna talk about that. Um, who go through different superstars that are gonna be in one of these Money in the Bank matches, or either Money in the Bank, or could be, depends how WWE irons figures out who would be in the other Money in the Bank match if they're having one, which I would think they would if they did last year, if they had two. So yeah, I mean that'll be definitely go into a heavier discussion on that next week. Um, as this edition of TW Wrestling Talk was, drastically changed because of the circumstances. So I'm trying to keep it short. In this case, as far as this, goes, as this was supposed to be a more extensive show. Um, but aside from that, I mean, on Raw, I mean, you had the WWE 2K14, the next WWE game, the cover reveal, um, which of course is going to feature The Rock on it. I kind of already knew this ahead of time. I think I heard back in May, early May or something, maybe before that, that The Rock was going to be on. That it was hinted, like Stephanie McMahon hinted it or something somewhere. Um, but so I wasn't surprised when they showed The Rock on the cover. So yeah, I mean, I think like who else? I mean, who else at this point can they put on the cover? They put CM Punk on last year. Um, you know, for WWE 2K15. I mean, I guess nobody was really at that at a big enough level to be on the cover this year. So I guess they figure let's put The Rock back on. He hasn't been on for years. Back in the early SmackDown days. So I guess that makes sense. But then again, I was hoping at this point, by this point there'd be somebody that was perhaps over enough to maybe be in that position where yeah he could be on the cover. But I guess there isn't really anybody on that high level that hasn't been on the cover in the past few years. When you think John Cena, Randy Orton, and CM Punk, this. So that's that. Um, Hopefully next year it would be the selection will perhaps be a little more interesting. So you know that's whatever. Now you know other than that, I mean, definitely the best mic segment of the night, if that's what you call it, was CM Punk and Paul Heyman. Definitely some interesting stuff here. Um, Punk really trying to get some truth out of Paul Heyman here, seeing if Paul Heyman had anything to do with Brock Lesnar attacking him last week. Definitely a compelling promo that definitely kept you listening. And Punk, it was cool. Punk went through his history a little bit. Um, and I mean, it was one of those promos that perhaps to the younger fans and the less intelligible, they wouldn't know. You know, they were saying things that were probably over those people's heads, but all in all, this was a great segment, I think, on the mic. Rather compelling, and it ended a little ironically. People thought that Punk wasn't gonna trust Heyman, and Heyman said, or Punk said to Heyman, I'm sorry I doubted you at the end, and as Punk had some doubt in Paul Heyman, and so for now it appears that way, but it'll be interesting to see how things unfold as Punk will likely have a match against Lesnar at SummerSlam. Um, Although it'll be interesting to see what they would have him Punk do then at Money in the Bank. Since the speculation is that he'll face Lesnar at SummerSlam. Um, so good segment. We'll have to keep seeing what else goes on here. Um, and then of course Punk wrestled in a fairly pointless match after that, but you know it's a shame. While of course as we all know, Punk is a huge Blackhawks fan, and while while this stuff was going on, I'm trying to you know hook go back and forth a little bit through Raw in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals, where if the Blackhawks won the game, they would win the cup, and of course they did. And Punk being a big Chicago Blackhawks fan, unfortunately he's out there doing all this while his Blackhawks were coming back at the end of the very end of the game, last minute and 15, scoring 2 goals in a 17-second span, I believe, and then winning the game 3-2 and winning the Stanley Cup for the second time in the past three years. 3 years ago they won it, so yeah, 3 4 year span, however you want to look at it. Um, so yeah, Punk was out there doing his thing while this was going on. Interestingly, so yeah, good stuff from Punk and Heyman tonight. it'll be interesting to see what goes on. Of course, Lesnar wasn't around last night on Raw. Yesterday I did pull out. I mean, it was understandable with the limited dates that they have to really use Lesnar. Um, and they had CM Punk play up like Lesnar doesn't have the balls to show up tonight, and so it's one of those things where it's interesting. You get to keep watching because you never know when Lesnar's going to show up. There's that element to it, and with the gold that Punk and Heyman can produce on the mic, and good stuff. Um, Other than that, you had uh, two separate monologues from John Cena and Mark Henry, kind of recapping some things. The big shocking retirement um, speech last week by Mark Henry. Even they called it the Academy Award winning acting job by Mark Henry. And it was predictable monologues. I think nothing. You know, at least for this week of John Cena wasn't maybe quite as bad as his monologue last week. Wasn't quite as cheesy and goofy as you'd normally think. Of course, it normally takes him a little while to really get to the cut to the chase and get to the point of his monologue, but it was all right, I guess. It wasn't anything great, and then of course later Mark Henry does his monologue, and you know there's a little bit of a logic issue here, but Cena doesn't come out at all. So I don't understand. I mean, he could have easily have come out if but I guess they didn't script it that way. So whatever. And now at this point, Henry was back in character, so the segment. There's no way really at this point that anything from here on out can top what happened last week on Raw. I mean, from here on out, I mean, I don't see Mark Henry winning at all against John Cena. I don't see anything great really coming out of this. The rest of this feud. It seems like a transitional feud up to SummerSlam, and it'll probably just be another John Cena win at Money in the Bank. Um, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much that. Nothing great there. But moving on, wasn't really wasn't really a whole lot else, I guess. The Shield were barely involved on tonight's episode of Monday Night Raw. Um, the Divas segment, I mean, I don't know, with Caitlyn and AJ Lee. Uh, I don't know, I mean, AJ Lee comes out, appearing to be impersonating Caitlyn, and wearing obviously wearing a cartoonish looking suit that from the get go just seems like a failed you know job there. I mean, it looks more like a giant puppet suit than something actually remotely close to maybe resembling Caitlyn. But yeah, so I mean, I wasn't too crazy about that segment, as I tend not to be. I mean, yeah, this is something I could take a little more seriously, something a little more um, compelling. I'm looking for, I mean, if you're gonna be a heel diva, I mean, I don't know. I want to be a little more compelled because some of the great heels in the business can really compel me, and with their segments, guys like Big Show have done that. CM Punk obviously, and amongst other guys. So yeah, I mean, moving along from there, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot else in this episode of Monday Night Raw. Um, Noticeably, you had guys that were absent. Um, there was no Miz. Uh, Wade Barrett wasn't on last night. I mean, there got no Antonio Cesaro. I mean, so there were some guys that were missing that you know some guys that I could see being in that other Money in the Bank briefcase match. Um, the one that might be more interesting just for the fact that a new star could arise from that, a new main event guy. Um, but yeah, I mean that's pretty much that as far as Raw goes. Um, SmackDown, I guess we'll wait and see if more is revealed with the Money in the Bank briefcase matches. Another potential one. Um, we will. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. As this is going to wrap things up for TW Wrestling Talk, which I guess uh, this is. I'm not going to be calling it TW Wrestling Talk anymore. It seems. As next week it'll be again the Great Wrestling Debate. Um, Bit of a spin off of a, a program around here, the Great Sports Debate. Um, Philadelphia and Comcast Sportsnet around here, my neck of the woods. But as I figured, we'll do a spin off and do the Great Wrestling Debate. How about that?
I agree.
So, um, that'll be that. It's going to be Tyler Werner and Wayne Kircher discussing money, more into this Money in the Bank, going through guys on the roster um, that could, you know, go through guy by guy and, you know, come up with ideas of who could, walk out for Money in the Bank with a Money in the Bank briefcase and, perhaps a, key to greatness, if you will, moving forward. So that'll wrap things up for this. Stay tuned as always, as things shall be picking up here on this channel.